Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching the stars through the large front window. The ship had been traveling through space for 18 months now, moving deeper into unknown territory than any human had ever gone before. Earth was so far behind them that radio signals would take years to reach home. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," said Amy Stone from her position at the communications station. She was a young woman with short brown hair and quick fingers that danced across her control panel. "Some kind of distress signal, but the language is nothing like anything in our databases." Jake walked over to look at her screen. The signal was weak but steady, repeating the same pattern over and over. "How far away is it coming from?" "About 6 hours at our current speed," Amy replied. "It's coming from a star system with several planets." Lieutenant Commander Lisa Park looked up from her tactical station. She was Jake's second in command, a tall woman with black hair tied back in a tight bun. "Could be a trap, Captain. We don't know what's out here." Jake nodded. Lisa was right to be careful. They were alone in deep space with no backup and no way to call for help. But they were explorers, and this was exactly the kind of discovery they had come to find. "Set course for the signal," Jake ordered. "But keep our weapons ready just in case." The Liberty changed direction and began moving toward the source of the signal. Chief Engineer Danny Walsh called up from the engine room to confirm they had enough fuel for the detour. Dr. Kevin Marsh, the ship's medical officer, made sure the medical bay was prepared for any injured survivors they might find. 6 hours. Later, they arrived at a solar system with 4 planets. The third planet from the sun was where the signal was coming from. As they got closer, they could see it was a rocky world with several moons. Large mining stations orbited the planet, and ships moved back and forth between the surface and the stations. "I'm seeing a lot of activity down there," Lisa reported. "Multiple ships, industrial facilities, and what looks like settlements on the surface." Amy worked at her station, trying to make sense of the different radio signals coming from the planet. "Captain, I'm picking up communications in at least 2 different languages. One seems to be the same as the distress signal we followed here." Jake studied the main screen, which showed the planet growing larger as they approached. "Take us into orbit, but keep our distance. I want to know what we're dealing with before we announce ourselves." As the Liberty moved into orbit around the planet, they got their first clear look at what was happening below. The planet's surface was covered with huge mining operations. Massive machines dug deep into the ground, pulling out glowing crystals and rare metals. But what caught Jake's attention was not the mining itself, but who was doing the work. "My God," whispered Dr. Marsh, who had come up to the bridge to see for himself. On the surface, thousands of blue-skinned beings worked in the mines. They looked humanoid, but were clearly not human, with longer arms and larger eyes adapted for low light. They wore simple clothes and worked with basic tools while floating platforms carried the materials they dug up to waiting transport ships. But overseeing the work were completely different beings. These creatures were tall, nearly twice the height of the blue-skinned workers, and their bodies seemed to be made of living crystal. They glowed with an inner light and moved without touching the ground, floating through the air as if gravity meant nothing to them. "Those crystal beings," Lisa said quietly. "They're not helping with the work. They're just watching." Amy had been listening to the radio signals, and her face was pale. "Captain, I've been translating some of the communications. The blue-skinned ones are called Karathi. The crystal beings call themselves Zelthani. And Captain, the Karathi aren't workers. They're slaves." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. The Karathi are forced to work in dangerous conditions. They're not paid, and they're not allowed to leave. When they don't meet their quotas, they're punished. And Captain, there's something else. The Zelthani take Karathi children away from their families to serve in what they call temples." The bridge fell silent as everyone processed this information. They had come looking for new life and new civilizations, but instead they had found something terrible. "We need more information," Jake said finally. "Amy, keep monitoring their communications. Lisa, scan their ships and weapons. I want to know what we're dealing with." Over the next few hours, they learned more about the situation. The Karathi had been slaves for over 1,000 years. The Zelthani controlled not just this planet, but dozens of others throughout this region of space. They ruled over many different alien species, all of whom served the Zelthani without question. The reason became clear when Amy translated more of the communications. The Karathi and other enslaved species believed the Zelthani were gods. They worshipped them, brought them offerings, and obeyed their every command because they thought the Zelthani were divine beings with unlimited power. The Zelthani have advanced technology, Lisa reported after scanning their ships. Their weapons and shields are far beyond anything we have. But Captain, I don't think they're gods. I think they're just very advanced aliens who use their technology to control others. Jake watched the mining operations continue below. Karathi workers collapsed from exhaustion and were simply dragged away by others. Children as young as 10 years old carried heavy loads of crystal ore. The Zelthani floated above it all, watching with what seemed like boredom. "We have to do something," Dr. Marsh said. "We can't just watch this and do nothing." "But what can we do?" Lisa asked. "We're one ship against their entire empire, and their technology is far more advanced than ours." Jake thought about their options. They could try to sneak away and pretend they had never seen this place. They could return to Earth and report what they had found, though that would take years. Or they could try to help, even though they were vastly outnumbered and outgunned. Before he could decide, the choice was made for him. Amy's board lit up with incoming signals. "Captain, we're being hailed. Multiple Zelthani ships are approaching our position." Jake looked at the main screen and saw 3 large crystal ships moving toward them. Each one was at least twice the size of the Liberty and glowed with the same inner light as the Zelthani themselves. "Put them on screen," Jake ordered. The main screen changed to show the interior of one of the Zelthani ships. The being that appeared was tall and imposing, its crystal body pulsing with different colors. When it spoke, its voice was deep and seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Unknown vessel, you have entered the domain of the Zelthani. I am Overseer Kethmore. You will identify yourselves immediately and explain your presence in our sacred space." Jake stepped forward. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Liberty. We're explorers from a distant world. We received a distress signal and came to investigate." The Zelthani's body flashed with brighter colors. "Earth? We have no record of this world in our archives. You are clearly a primitive species that has somehow acquired space travel technology. You will submit to our authority and prepare to be catalogued." "Catalogued?" Jake asked. "All lesser species in our domain serve the Zelthani in whatever capacity we deem appropriate. Some are workers, others are soldiers, still others provide entertainment or serve in our temples. You will be assigned a role based on your abilities." Jake felt anger rising inside him. "We're not interested in serving anyone. We're free beings from a free world." The Zelthani's colors shifted to angry reds and oranges. "Freedom is an illusion for lesser beings. Only the Zelthani are truly free, for we are divine. You will learn to accept your place in the natural order, or you will be destroyed as an example to others." To emphasize the point, one of the Zelthani ships fired a beam of energy at a small Karathi transport that was trying to flee the area. The transport ship exploded instantly, killing everyone aboard. "That," said Overseer Kethmore, "is what happens to those who resist the will of the gods." Jake stared at the expanding cloud of debris that had once been a ship full of innocent people. He thought about the enslaved Karathi below, the stolen children, the 1,000 years of suffering under Zelthani rule. "We are not your subjects," Jake said firmly, "and you are not our gods." The Zelthani's body flashed with such bright light that everyone on the bridge had to shield their eyes. "Blasphemy! No species has ever dared to question our divine nature. For this insult, your people will suffer greatly before we allow them the mercy of death." The communication ended, and the 3 Zelthani ships began moving into attack positions around the Liberty. "Battle stations," Jake ordered. "All hands, prepare for combat." As alarms sounded throughout the ship, Jake knew they were probably about to die. But he also knew they had no choice. Sometimes you had to fight, even when you couldn't win, because some things were more important than survival. The war against the false gods was about to begin. The Liberty shook as the first Zelthani energy beam struck their shields. Captain Jake Morrison grabbed the arm of his command chair to steady himself as sparks flew from damaged control panels around the bridge. "Shields down to 70%, Lisa Park shouted over the noise of alarms. "Their weapons are more powerful than our scans indicated." Jake watched the main screen as the 3 Zelthani ships moved in a perfect triangle formation around the Liberty. Their crystal hulls pulsed with bright energy as they charged their weapons for another attack. "Return fire," Jake ordered. The Liberty's guns fired streams of energy at the nearest Zelthani ship. The beam struck the alien vessel's shields and scattered harmlessly in all directions like water hitting a stone wall. "Our weapons aren't even scratching them," Lisa reported, her voice tight with worry. Down in the engine room, Danny Walsh was pushing the ship's systems beyond their normal limits. "Bridge, I'm giving you everything I can, but these engines weren't built for combat. We're running hot on all systems." Dr. Kevin Marsh's voice came over the intercom from the medical bay. "I've got injured crew members coming in. Whatever you're going to do it fast." Jake watched as the Zelthani ships moved closer, their weapons charging again. But something was strange about their attack pattern. They weren't trying to destroy the Liberty quickly. Instead, they seemed to be playing with them, like a cat playing with a mouse before killing it. "Amy, are you picking up any communications from their ships?" Jake asked. Amy Stone nodded from her station. "Yes, Captain. They're talking to each other. It sounds like they're deciding what to do with us." "What are they saying?" Amy's face was pale as she translated. "They're discussing whether to kill us quickly or capture us alive. One of them says humans might make good workers in their crystal mines. Another says we should be made into an example for other species." The Liberty shook again as another energy beam hit them. This time, Jake noticed that the beam was carefully aimed at their weapon systems, not their main hull. "They're trying to disable us, not destroy us," Jake realized. "They want to capture us alive." Lisa looked up from her tactical display. "Captain, at this rate, they'll have us helpless in another 10 minutes. Our shields can't take much more of this," Jake thought quickly. The Zelthani had superior technology, more ships, and more firepower. But they also seemed to have one major weakness. They were overconfident. They had spent so long fighting primitive species that they expected easy victory. "Lisa, stop targeting their ships directly. Amy, I need you to scan for any other ships in this system. Danny, prepare to shut down all non-essential systems on my command." "Captain, what are you planning?" Lisa asked. "The Zelthani think they know how we fight because they've fought other species before. But they've never fought humans. We're going to show them something they've never seen." Amy worked at her station for a moment, then looked up. "Captain, I'm detecting several Karathi ships hiding behind the planet's moons. They look like civilian transports." "Are they armed?" "Not with weapons, but they're carrying mining equipment. Explosive charges, industrial cutters, that sort of thing." Jake smiled grimly. "Perfect. Amy, can you contact them?" "I think so. I've been learning their language. Tell them we're here to help, but they need to trust us and follow our lead exactly." As Amy worked to contact the Karathi ships, Jake turned to Lisa. "I want you to target their engines with everything we have, but wait for my signal. Danny, when I give the word, I want you to make it look like our engines are failing." "Captain, that's risky. If they think we're disabled, they might just destroy us." "They won't. They want us alive, remember? That's our advantage." The Liberty shook again as another Zelthani beam struck their shields. Warning lights flashed red across the bridge as their shield strength dropped to 40%. Amy looked up from her station. "Captain, I've made contact with the Karathi. There are 5 ships and they're willing to help, but they're terrified of the Zelthani. They say no one has ever successfully fought them before. Tell them that's about to change," Jake said. "Here's what we're going to do." Jake quickly explained his plan to the crew. It was dangerous and required perfect timing, but it was their only chance. The Zelthani ships were moving closer, probably preparing to board the Liberty. "All stations, prepare for Operation Longshot," Jake announced to the ship. "This is going to be rough." The nearest Zelthani ship moved to within a few hundred meters of the Liberty. Jake could see movement inside its crystal hull as the aliens prepared to send boarding parties across. "Now, Danny, kill the engines." The Liberty's engines suddenly went silent. The ship's lights dimmed and they began drifting through space as if completely disabled. "Excellent performance," Jake said quietly. "Lisa, are you ready?" "All weapons targeted on the lead ship's engine section, Captain." On the main screen, they could see the Zelthani ships moving into position to capture them. The aliens were probably congratulating themselves on another easy victory. "Amy, signal the Karathi ships. Tell them to move to attack position but stay hidden until I give the word." Jake watched as the lead Zelthani ship extended a boarding tube toward the Liberty. The aliens were so confident that they weren't even bothering to keep their weapons trained on the human ship. "Captain," Lisa whispered, "they're about to board us." "Wait for it," Jake said, his hand hovering over the command console. The boarding tube was almost connected to the Liberty's hull when Jake gave the signal. "Now, all weapons fire! Danny, engines to full power!" The Liberty suddenly came alive again. Her engines roared back to life, and every weapon on the ship fired at once. The concentrated beam struck the lead Zelthani ship's engine section at point-blank range. The Zelthani ship's shields flickered and failed under the unexpected assault. The Liberty's weapons punched through the crystal hull and struck something vital inside. The alien ship began spinning out of control, its engines failing. At the same time, the 5 Karathi ships appeared from behind the planet's moons. They weren't warships, but they were carrying mining explosives. Under Amy's coordinated instructions, they launched their explosive charges at the second Zelthani ship. The Zelthani were caught completely off guard. They had expected easy victory, not a coordinated attack from multiple directions. Their perfect formation broke apart as they tried to respond to threats from several angles at once. "Direct hit on the lead ship," Lisa reported. "Their engines are down and they're drifting." The second Zelthani ship was trying to avoid the explosive charges launched by the Karathi ships, but several of them struck its hull. The explosions weren't powerful enough to destroy the ship, but they damaged its shields and weapon systems. "The third ship is turning to attack the Karathi vessels," Lisa warned. Jake watched as the remaining undamaged Zelthani ship began firing on the small Karathi transports. The first transport ship exploded under the alien weapons, killing everyone aboard. "We can't let them slaughter the Karathi," Jake said. "All power to engines, ramming speed." "Captain, are you insane?" Lisa asked. "Maybe, but it's worked so far." The Liberty accelerated directly toward the third Zelthani ship. The aliens, seeing the human ship approaching at high speed, turned their weapons toward the Liberty. But they had to choose between destroying the human ship and continuing to attack the Karathi vessels. At the last second, Jake ordered the engines reversed. The Liberty didn't actually ram the Zelthani ship, but came close enough to force it to change course. The maneuver put the Liberty between the aliens and the remaining Karathi ships. "Now we're in close combat range," Jake said. "Lisa, continuous fire on their weapon systems." The battle became a chaotic dance of ships trying to outmaneuver each other in the space around the planet. The Liberty was smaller and more agile than the Zelthani ships, but the aliens had superior weapons and shields. "Captain, I'm picking up more communications," Amy reported. "The Zelthani are calling for reinforcements. They're saying they've never encountered resistance like this before." Jake felt a moment of satisfaction. They had surprised the aliens, damaged their ships and shown them that humans wouldn't go quietly into slavery. But he also knew this was just the beginning. "How long until reinforcements arrive?" he asked. Amy listened to the alien communications for a moment. 6 hours, maybe less. And Captain, they're not just sending a few ships. They're sending a full battle fleet. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. They were tired, injured, and facing impossible odds. But they were still fighting, still refusing to give up. "Then we have 6 hours to figure out how to fight a battle fleet," Jake said. "Suggestions?" Lisa looked up from her tactical display. "Captain, we could try to run. The Zelthani ships are damaged and we might be able to escape." "And leave the Karathi to face the aliens' anger alone?" Jake shook his head. "No, we started this fight and we're going to finish it." Dr. Marsh's voice came over the intercom. "Captain, I've got 12 injured crew members down here, but we're all still alive. Whatever you decide to do, we're with you." Jake looked at the main screen where the damaged Zelthany ships were regrouping. Soon they would face a battle fleet with enough firepower to destroy a dozen ships like the Liberty. But they had something the Zelthany didn't expect: the determination to fight for freedom, no matter the cost. 6 hours later, the Zelthany battle fleet arrived. Captain Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the Liberty as 12 massive ships dropped out of hyperspace near the planet. Each one was 3 times larger than the Liberty and glowed with the same crystal energy as their builders. "My God," whispered Lisa Park as she studied her tactical display. "Captain, each of those ships has enough firepower to destroy a small moon." Jake nodded grimly. The 3 damaged Zelthany ships from their first battle had been joined by this overwhelming force. Against 15 enemy vessels, the Liberty and 4 remaining Karathi ships had no chance in a direct fight. "Amy, are you still monitoring their communications?" Jake asked. Amy Stone looked up from her station, her face pale. "Yes, Captain. They're very angry about what happened in the first battle. They're calling us an infection that needs to be removed before it spreads to other species." "What about the damaged ships? Are they still operational?" "2 of them are back in fighting condition. The 3rd one is being towed back to their main base for repairs." Danny Walsh's voice came over the intercom from the engine room. "Captain, I've been studying the damage we did to their ships. I think I found something important." "What is it, Danny?" "The way their power systems work is different from ours. When we hit their engines, it didn't just damage the engines. It caused problems throughout their entire ship. I think their power cores are connected in a way that makes them vulnerable to cascading failures." Jake felt a spark of hope. "Explain." "If we can hit their power cores in exactly the right spot, the explosion should spread through their whole power network. One good hit could disable or destroy an entire ship." Lisa looked up from her tactical station. "But Captain, their power cores are deep inside their ships, protected by the strongest armor and shields. We'd have to get through all their defenses first." "Not necessarily," Amy said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. "I've been listening to their internal communications. When they're in battle, they rotate their shield frequencies to protect against different types of weapons, but there's a brief moment during each rotation when their shields are weakest." Jake leaned forward. "How brief?" "About 2 seconds every 30 seconds. And Captain, I think I can predict when it's going to happen based on their communication patterns." Dr. Kevin Marsh arrived on the bridge, having finished treating the wounded from their first battle. "Captain, I've been thinking about what we learned from the Karathi. They said their people have been slaves for 1,000 years. That's a long time for any civilization to maintain control without rebellion. What's your point, Doctor?" "My point is that the Zelthany must have very effective methods of keeping their subjects in line. But what if those methods depend on their subjects believing they're actually gods?" Jake saw where the doctor was going with this. "You think if we can prove they're not gods, their empire might collapse?" "It's possible. Fear and religious belief are powerful tools of control, but they're also fragile. If people stop believing, the whole system falls apart." Amy suddenly looked up from her station with excitement. "Captain, I think I've found something. I've been analyzing the Zelthany communication systems, and I managed to access some of their historical records." "What kind of records?" "Records about how they got their technology." "Captain, they didn't build it themselves. They found it." The bridge fell, silent as everyone absorbed this information. Amy continued, her voice growing more excited as she spoke. "According to their own records, about 4,000 years ago, the Zelthany were a primitive species living on a single planet. Then they discovered the ruins of an ancient civilization, much more advanced than they were. They found ships, weapons, and technology they couldn't understand but learned to use. So they've been pretending this stolen technology is divine power?" Jake asked. "Exactly. And Captain, I think I can broadcast this information to every species in their empire." Jake thought quickly. They had found the Zelthany's weakness, but they still had to survive the next battle to use it. The enemy fleet was moving into attack position and time was running out. "Amy, start preparing that broadcast, but don't send it yet." "Lisa, I want you to target the power cores of the enemy ships, but wait for Amy's signal about their shield rotations. Danny, give me everything you can from the engines. Captain, Lisa said, even if we can hit their power cores, we can only attack one ship at a time. They have 12 ships in fighting condition. Then we better make every shot count, Jake replied. Amy, contact the Karathi ships. Tell them to spread out and attack from different directions. We need to confuse the Zelthani formation. The enemy fleet began firing as soon as they came within range. The space around the Liberty filled with energy beams and explosions as the human ship twisted and turned to avoid the devastating weapons. Shields down to 50%, Lisa reported. We can't take much more of this. Amy, now would be a good time for that broadcast, Jake shouted over the noise of alarms. Broadcasting on all frequencies, Amy replied. I'm sending the Zelthani historical records to every ship and planet in this sector. On the main screen, Jake could see the Zelthani ships continuing their attack, but something was changing. The precise formation they had maintained was starting to break apart as individual ships began receiving the broadcast. Amy was translating the communications flying between the enemy ships. Captain, they're arguing among themselves. Some of them are demanding that the broadcast be stopped, but others are asking if it's true. Keep broadcasting, Jake ordered. Lisa, are you ready to target their power cores? Ready, Captain. Amy, I need you to tell me exactly when their shields are weakest. Amy watched her displays carefully, timing the enemy ship's shield rotations. Now! Fire now! The Liberty's weapons fired in a concentrated beam at the nearest Zelthani ship. The timing was perfect. The beam struck the ship's power core just as its shields were rotating, punching through the weakened defenses. The result was spectacular. The power core explosion spread through the Zelthani ship's entire energy network like lightning. Systems failed throughout the vessel, and within seconds, the massive ship was drifting dead in space. Direct hit. One enemy ship disabled. Lisa announced, but the victory celebration was short-lived. The remaining Zelthani ships responded with increased fury, concentrating their fire on the Liberty. The human ship shook violently as multiple energy beams struck it. Shields down to 20%, Lisa warned. We can't survive another attack like that. Jake watched as the Karathi ships bravely attacked the Zelthani fleet from multiple directions. The small transport ships were no match for the alien warships, but they were buying the Liberty precious time. Amy? What's happening with the broadcast? Is it having any effect? Amy's eyes were wide as she listened to the flood of communications across the sector. Captain, it's working. I'm picking up transmissions from dozens of planets. The enslaved species are starting to question their masters. Some are even beginning to revolt. On the main screen, Jake could see that 2 of the Zelthani ships had stopped attacking and were trying to contact their home base. The broadcast was causing confusion and doubt throughout their fleet. Lisa, target the ship that's still firing at the Karathi vessels. Amy, signal for the next shield rotation. Shields rotating. Now. Again, the Liberty's weapons found their mark at the perfect moment. The second Zelthani ship suffered the same cascading power failure as the first, leaving it helpless in space. But the Liberty's luck was running out. The concentrated attacks from multiple enemy ships had taken their toll. Sparks flew from control panels around the bridge, and the lights flickered as power systems failed. Captain, we've lost main power to the forward weapons, Danny reported, from the engine room. I'm running on backup systems, but they won't last long. Jake realized they had perhaps one more shot before the Liberty was completely disabled. He had to make it count. Amy, I want you to broadcast something else. Tell every enslaved species in this sector that the Zelthani can be defeated. Show them what we've done here. As Amy worked to expand the broadcast, Jake watched the remaining Zelthani ships. Some were still fighting, but others were clearly confused and uncertain. The revelation about their stolen technology had shaken their confidence. Captain, Amy said, I'm getting responses from all over the sector. The Karathi on the mining planet below us are refusing to work. 3 other species on nearby worlds have started armed rebellions. The Zelthani Empire is beginning to collapse. Jake felt a surge of hope, but he knew the battle wasn't over yet. The remaining Zelthani ships were regrouping, and their commander was probably calling for even more reinforcements. "Lisa, one more shot, make it count." "Ready, Captain, but after this we're out of main power for weapons." Jake watched the tactical display as the Zelthani ships moved into a new attack formation. Whatever happened next, they had already accomplished something amazing. They had shown the galaxy that the false gods could bleed. Amy, signal the shield rotation. Lisa, fire when ready. The Liberty's final shot struck home, disabling a third Zelthani ship. But as the enemy vessel drifted away, Jake could see more ships arriving on the edge of the system. The massive Zelthani fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a wall of crystal death. 40 ships, each one glowing with deadly energy, formed a perfect battle line that stretched across space. At the center of the formation was the largest ship Captain Jake Morrison had ever seen, a crystal palace the size of a small city that pulsed with golden light. "That's their command ship," Amy Stone said from her communication station, her voice barely above a whisper. "The readings I'm getting from it are off the charts." The Liberty drifted between the Karathi mining planet and the approaching fleet, her weapon systems offline and her shields nearly depleted. Around them, the wreckage of disabled Zelthani ships served as a reminder of what they had accomplished, but also of how hopeless their situation had become. "Captain," Lisa Park said from her tactical station, "I'm reading enough firepower in that fleet to destroy every planet in this system." Jake nodded grimly. Through the main screen, he could see the massive command ship opening communication channels. When the image appeared, it showed a Zelthani, unlike any they had seen before. This being was twice the size of the others. Its crystal body shot through with veins of pure gold, and its eyes burned with an inner fire that seemed almost alive. "I am High Arbiter Vexhai, voice of the divine Zelthani and master of 10,000 worlds," the being said, its voice echoing with power that made the bridge speakers crackle. "You are the humans who dare to spread lies about the gods themselves." Jake stepped forward, despite the fear that gripped his heart. "We spread no lies. We only shared your own historical records." Vexhai's crystal body flashed with angry red light. "Those records are sacred texts that lesser beings cannot understand. You have twisted their meaning to serve your rebellion against divine order." "Divine order?" Jake felt his anger rising. "You mean slavery and oppression?" "I mean the natural state of the universe where the strong rule the weak and the gods command all lesser life. For 4,000 years, the Zelthani have brought peace and order to this sector of space. No species went hungry under our rule. No world suffered from war or chaos." "Because you enslaved them all," Jake shot back. "You stole their freedom and called it peace." Vexhai's body pulsed brighter. "Freedom is chaos. Freedom is war and suffering. We offered protection and purpose, but you have poisoned their minds with dangerous ideas." Amy suddenly looked up from her station with excitement. "Captain, I'm picking up transmissions from all across the sector. The rebellions are spreading faster than the Zelthani can respond to them." On her screen, Amy showed a map of the local star systems. Red dots were appearing on dozens of worlds as enslaved species rose up against their masters. The Karathi mining colonies, the Belvani agricultural worlds, the Thek manufacturing planets, all of them were in revolt. "Impossible," Vexhai snarled. "Our subjects are loyal. They worship us as they should." "Not anymore," Jake said. "They know the truth now. They know you're not gods, just tyrants with stolen technology. Then they will all burn." Vexhai raised one crystal arm, and the entire Zelthani fleet began moving forward. "I will make an example of this system that will be remembered for 1,000 years. Every human will die slowly, and every world that supported your rebellion will be turned to glass." Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. They were exhausted, injured, and facing certain death. But they had started something that couldn't be stopped. Even if they died here, the truth would continue to spread. "All hands," Jake announced over the ship's intercom. "This is the captain. We knew this mission might be a one-way trip when we left Earth. We've traveled farther from home than any human before us, and we've seen wonders and horrors beyond imagination. But most importantly, we've shown the galaxy that freedom is worth fighting for no matter the cost." Dr. Kevin Marsh's voice came over the intercom from the medical bay. "Captain, every crew member who can walk is requesting permission to return To their duty stations. Permission granted, Doctor. Thank you. As injured crew members returned to their posts, Amy continued monitoring communications from across the sector. Captain, the rebellions are coordinating with each other. The Karathi are sharing mining explosives with the Belvani. The Thek are building weapons for anyone who needs them. Can you put me in contact with the rebel forces? Jake asked. I think so. I've been learning their languages and they're all listening to our broadcast frequency. Do it. Amy worked at her station for several minutes, then nodded. You're connected, Captain. Broadcasting to rebel forces on 47 worlds. Jake took a deep breath. He was about to address an audience of millions of beings across dozens of star systems. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Liberty. To all free beings fighting against Zelthani oppression, listen carefully. The High Arbiter is bringing a massive fleet to destroy this system and end our rebellion. But his fleet can't be everywhere at once. Jake paused, watching as the Zelthani ships continued their approach. While they're focused on destroying us, you have a chance to strike at their bases, their supply lines, and their command centers. This is your moment. Fight for your freedom now, while their attention is elsewhere. Amy suddenly looked up with amazement. Captain, they're responding. Rebel fleets from 12 different systems are launching coordinated attacks on Zelthani strongholds. On the main screen, Vexhi's face twisted with rage as reports reached him of rebellions breaking out across his empire. You think these insects can defeat the might of the Zelthani? We have ruled for millennia. And that's your weakness, Jake realized. You've been in power so long that you've forgotten how to adapt. You expect your enemies to fight the same way they always have, but we're not fighting like your other enemies. To prove his point, Jake turned to Amy. Signal the Karathi mining ships. Tell them to use their drilling equipment on the planet's surface. Captain, what are you planning? Lisa asked. The Zelthani want to make an example of this system. Let's give them an example they'll never forget. Amy translated Jake's instructions to the Karathi ships on the planet below. Within minutes, massive mining drills began boring into the planet's crust in specific locations that Amy had calculated. Captain, the Karathi are asking what you want them to drill for, Amy said. Tell them to drill for the planet's core. We're going to turn this entire world into a weapon. Lisa's eyes went wide. Captain, are you talking about causing a planetary explosion? Not an explosion. Something better. Amy, how long until those drills reach the molten core? Amy quickly calculated. About 20 minutes with the equipment they have. Jake turned to the main screen where Vexhi waited. High Arbiter, I have a proposition for you. You are in no position to make demands, human. Not demands. An offer. You can either withdraw your fleet and begin negotiations for the peaceful liberation of all enslaved species, or you can watch as we demonstrate what happens when desperate people have nothing left to lose. Vexhi laughed. A sound like crystal, breaking. You threaten me with one damaged ship and a handful of mining vessels? My fleet will destroy you in minutes. Maybe. But it will take your fleet at least 15 minutes to reach us and begin their attack. By then, the Karathi drilling operation will be complete. What drilling operation? Jake smiled grimly. The one that's about to turn this planet's molten core into the largest thermal lance in galactic history. When those drills reach the core, the pressure release will create a directed energy beam pointed straight at your command ship. It won't destroy your fleet, but it will definitely destroy you. For the first time since the conversation began, Vexhi looked uncertain. You would destroy an entire planet just to kill me? The planet won't be destroyed, just reshaped. And yes, I would do it to stop you from enslaving billions of innocent beings. Amy suddenly called out, Captain, I'm getting emergency transmissions from Zelthani forces throughout the sector. The rebel attacks are succeeding. 3 major Zelthani bases have fallen and their supply lines are in chaos. Vexhi's crystal body began flashing with rapid, angry colors as he received the same reports. His perfect empire was crumbling around him, and he was trapped between a planet that was about to become a weapon and rebel forces attacking from every direction. You have 5 minutes to decide, Jake said calmly. Surrender and negotiate, or face the consequences. The High Arbiter's image flickered with rage and desperation. Around him, Jake could see other Zelthani frantically working at control stations, probably trying to calculate whether they could destroy the Liberty before the drilling operation was complete. "Captain," Amy said quietly. "The Karathi report. They're almost through to the core. Whatever Vexhai decides, he needs to decide now." Jake watched the massive Zelthani fleet hanging in space, their weapons charged and ready. 40 ships against one damaged human vessel and a few mining transports. On paper, it should have been no contest. But papers didn't account for determination, ingenuity, and the desperate courage of people fighting for their freedom. 2 minutes, Jake announced. Vexhai's crystal form was now flashing so rapidly with different colors that it was hard to look at him directly. He was facing a choice no Zelthani ruler had ever faced before: surrender to a species they considered inferior, or risk death in a gamble to maintain their empire. The planet's core erupted in a controlled explosion that sent a massive beam of superheated energy straight up through the crust and into space. The thermal lance was exactly as powerful as Captain Jake Morrison had predicted, a focused stream of molten rock and plasma that could cut through anything in its path. High Arbiter Vexhai had exactly 3 seconds to make his choice. He could order his fleet to attack the Liberty and risk being destroyed by the planetary weapon, or he could move his command ship out of the beam's path and lose face in front of his entire fleet. He chose to save his own life. All ships, evasive. "Maneuvers!" Vexhai screamed, his crystal body flashing with panicked colors. The massive Zelthani command ship turned away from the thermal lance just as the beam reached space. The column of energy passed so close to the ship's hull that the crystal surface began to glow and crack from the heat. Several smaller Zelthani vessels were caught at the edge of the beam and suffered severe damage to their shields and weapons. But the real damage was not to their ships. It was to their reputation. "Amy, are you broadcasting this?" Jake asked. Amy. Stone nodded from her communications station. "Broadcasting on all frequencies to every world in the sector, Captain. Everyone can see their so-called god running away from a human weapon." On the main screen, Vexhai's face was twisted with rage and humiliation. For 4,000 years, no Zelthani leader had ever been forced to retreat from a battle. The psychological impact on both his fleet and the rebellious populations was immediate. "Captain," Amy said excitedly, "I'm getting reports from all over the sector. The rebel forces are winning major victories." When they saw Vexhai retreat, it gave them the courage they needed to press their attacks. Lisa Park looked up from her tactical station. "The Zelthani fleet is in disarray. Some ships are trying to regroup, but others are breaking formation. I don't think they know what to do." Jake watched as confusion spread through the enemy fleet. These beings had spent millennia believing they were superior to all other life forms. Seeing their leader forced to flee from humans had shattered something fundamental in their understanding of the universe. "Open a channel to the entire fleet," Jake ordered. When the communication link was established, Jake addressed not just Vexhai but every Zelthani ship in the system. "This is Captain Morrison. Your empire is falling apart around you. Rebellions are succeeding on dozens of worlds. Your own historical records prove you're not gods. And your High Arbiter just ran away from a single human ship." Jake paused, letting his words sink in. "But it doesn't have to end in more bloodshed. You can choose to surrender now. Help us establish a peaceful transition to freedom for all enslaved species, and find a new way to live in the galaxy. Or you can continue fighting a war you've already lost." The response was immediate and unexpected. Instead of anger or defiance, Jake heard something he had never expected from the Zelthani: doubt. Several of the younger Zelthani commanders began talking among themselves, questioning whether they should continue following Vexhai's orders. Amy translated their conversations, revealing deep divisions within the fleet about whether to keep fighting or negotiate surrender. "High Arbiter," one of the Zelthani ship commanders said over the open channel, "perhaps we should consider the humans' offer. Our empire is under attack on multiple fronts, and our forces are spread too thin to respond effectively." Vexhai's crystal body flashed with furious red light. "You dare question my authority? I am the voice of the divine Zelthani. Are we truly divine? Asked another commander. The humans have shown us our own historical records. If we found our technology instead of creating it, what does that make us? Jake watched in amazement as the Zelthani fleet began arguing among themselves. The foundation of their empire had been the absolute belief in their own godhood. Once that belief was shaken, everything else began to crumble. The argument was settled when Amy received an emergency transmission from the Zelthani home system. Captain, I'm picking up a priority message from their capital world. The rebellions have reached their core territories. The Zelthani home government is requesting immediate evacuation. Vex High received the same message, and his crystal form began to dim as the reality of the situation hit him. His empire, which had lasted for 4,000 years, was collapsing in a matter of hours. I will not surrender to inferior beings, Vex High said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Then you'll die with your empire, Jake replied calmly. But your people don't have to die with you. Jake turned to address the other Zelthani commanders directly. Any ship that wishes to surrender will be treated with respect and dignity. We're not seeking revenge, just freedom for the enslaved species. You can be part of building a better galaxy, or you can follow your High Arbiter into destruction. The first Zelthani ship to surrender was commanded by a young officer named Kale Voss. His ship powered down its weapons and moved away from the main fleet. Within minutes, 5 more ships followed his example. Traitors, Vex High screamed. I will destroy you all myself. The High Arbiter's command ship turned its massive weapons toward the surrendering vessels, but before he could fire, something unexpected happened. The remaining loyal ships moved to protect the surrenders, forming a barrier between Vex High and his targets. Enough, said Commander Thexali, captain of one of the largest Zelthani warships. The Empire is finished, Vex High. Accept reality. What followed was the strangest battle Jake had ever witnessed. The Zelthani fleet split into 2 groups and began fighting each other. Those who wanted to continue the war fought desperately against those who had accepted that their empire was over. The battle was brief, but decisive. The commanders who wanted peace outnumbered those still loyal to Vex High. Within an hour, the High Arbiter's supporters had either surrendered or been destroyed. Vex High himself was captured when his own crew mutinied, rather than die for a lost cause. The mighty being who had claimed to be the voice of the divine Zelthani was taken prisoner by his own people. With the Zelthani fleet neutralized, Jake turned his attention to the broader situation. Amy's communications equipment was flooded with messages from liberated worlds across the sector. The Karathi had freed their mining colonies. The Belvani had reclaimed their agricultural worlds. The Thek had taken control of their manufacturing planets. Captain, Amy said, I'm getting a message from Earth. Our long-range transmitters are back online. Jake felt his heart leap. After 18 months of silence, they could finally contact home. Put them through. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Admiral Sarah Murphy, head of Earth's space exploration program. Captain Morrison, we've been trying to reach you for hours. We're picking up your transmissions from the Orion sector. Did you really just overthrow an alien empire? Jake smiled tiredly. It's a long story, Admiral. But yes, we did. And we're going to need a much bigger ship for the trip home. Why's that? Because we're bringing representatives from about 40 different alien species who want to establish diplomatic relations with Earth. Over the following weeks, Jake worked with the former Zelthani commanders and rebel leaders to establish a new government for the Orion sector. They called it the Galactic Council, and its founding principle was simple. No species had the right to rule over another. The process wasn't easy. Some worlds wanted revenge against their former oppressors. Others feared that humans would simply replace the Zelthani as the dominant power. But slowly, carefully, they built something new. Jake found himself serving as Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Council. Lisa Park took command of the Liberty and led a new peacekeeping fleet made up of ships from multiple species. Danny Walsh became head of Technology Exchange, helping former slave worlds rebuild their civilizations. Amy Stone founded the Interspecies Communication Corps, making sure all species could talk to each other as equals. Dr. Kevin Marsh established medical exchange programs that saved millions of lives. The Zelthani who survived learned to live as equals rather than rulers. Many struggled with the transition, but others found new purpose in helping repair the damage their empire had caused. Vexhai himself was tried for crimes against sapient beings and sentenced to work in the rehabilitation of former slave worlds. 1 year after the battle that ended the Zelthani Empire, Jake stood on the observation deck of the new Galactic Council station. Through the large windows he could see ships from dozens of different species coming and going in peaceful cooperation. A young Karathi child named Zexai approached him. She was one of the children they had rescued from the mining planet, now attending the first integrated school in the sector. "Ambassador Morrison," she said in careful English, "my teacher says you killed the gods. Is that true?" Jake knelt down to her level and smiled. "No, Zexai. We didn't kill any gods." "Then what happened to the Zelthani?" "We proved that there were never any gods to begin with. Just people like you and me trying to figure out how to live together." Zexai thought about this for a moment. "So anyone can be free?" "Anyone can be free," Jake confirmed. "But freedom isn't something that's given to you. It's something you have to choose, and sometimes you have to fight for it."